Good evening and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're cutting through the noise on 5 stories the mainstream press would rather you skim past. From record gambling frenzies in Hong Kong to global labor revolts, from demographic time bombs to suspicious vessels off Yemen, we're connecting dots the corporate networks refuse to draw.
I'm Maya Clarity. And before we begin, viewers, ask yourself this: when you see a lottery jackpot story trending while workers march in the streets and ships vanish off hostile coastlines, is that coincidence, or is that curation? Tonight we follow the money, the power, and the silence. Let's begin in Hong Kong, Alex.
According to the South China Morning Post, Hongkongers are queuing around the block for a record 228 million Hong Kong dollars Mark 6 jackpot, that's roughly 29.1 million US dollars. Turnover hit 391 million Hong Kong dollars by 8:30 p.m. Saturday, more than 6 times the previous draw. The Hong Kong Jockey Club, which runs Mark 6, is a so-called non-profit, but it is the single largest taxpayer in Hong Kong, funneling billions to the government annually.
And that's the story buried beneath the celebratory queue photos. The Jockey Club isn't just a charity casino, it is a quasi-state institution that depends on working-class desperation. When wages stagnate, housing costs explode, and Hong Kong's median apartment price exceeds 20 times annual income, a 228 million Hong Kong dollars fantasy isn't entertainment, it's an exit strategy. The bigger the jackpot, the more visible the despair.
Exactly. Mainstream coverage frames this as festive, look at the excited bettors. But consider who benefits. The Jockey Club takes its cut. The government takes its tax. The winners, statistically, are nearly always institutional. Meanwhile, problem gambling rates in Hong Kong have climbed steadily since the 2019 protests and the post-COVID economic squeeze. The state has every incentive to keep this anesthetic flowing.
And here's the pattern: when civic agency is suppressed, manufactured fortune fills the void. You can't protest, but you can dream. You can't unionize meaningfully, but you can buy a ticket. This is the bread and circuses of the financialized authoritarian model, and Hong Kong is becoming a case study. The Jockey Club's dominance isn't a quirk, it's infrastructure.
Which brings us perfectly to story 2. Al Jazeera reports that workers, activists, and trade unions around the world marked International Labor Day on May 1 with rallies from Manila to Madrid, from Istanbul to Buenos Aires. And yet, pull up any major US cable network's coverage from yesterday. You'll find almost nothing.
That silence is the story. May Day is a working-class holiday born in Chicago in 1886, the Haymarket Affair, where workers were killed demanding an 8-hour day. The United States deliberately moved its labor holiday to September to sever that radical lineage. So when CNN, Fox, and MSNBC ignore global May Day rallies, they're continuing a century-old project of memory erasure.
And what were workers actually demanding this year? In France, pension reform rollbacks. In Turkey, the right to assemble in Taksim Square, banned again. In the Philippines, a living wage. In South Korea, protections against algorithmic firing by gig platforms. These aren't fringe issues, Maya. These are the central economic questions of our era, and they're being ghosted by the press that claims to inform us.
Because the press is owned by the same conglomerates these workers are striking against. Comcast owns NBC. Disney owns ABC. These aren't neutral observers, they're combatants who benefit when labor stays atomized and invisible. Al Jazeera, funded by Qatar, has its own agenda, but on this story they're doing what American outlets won't, showing you that workers globally are reaching the same conclusions at the same time.
And it cuts across ideologies. Filipino jeepney drivers, French rail workers, Greek dock workers, Brazilian Amazon employees, these movements aren't coordinated, but they're convergent. That's what terrifies the ownership class. Spontaneous global recognition that the deal is rigged. The networks would rather show you a lottery queue.
Speaking of structural crises the press won't seriously engage, Story 3. The South China Morning Post reports that Arthur Kleinman, a Harvard physician-anthropologist, is calling for the US and China to set aside geopolitical hostility and cooperate on the global aging crisis. He proposes the US learn from China's emerging long-term care insurance system, while China studies the American nursing home model.
Kleinman's headline is provocative: robots can't save us. And he's right. Silicon Valley has spent a decade promising that eldercare robots will solve a demographic catastrophe. Japan tried this. The robots ended up as expensive paperweights while underpaid migrant workers actually do the care work. The robot narrative is a diversion, It lets policymakers avoid funding human caregivers and reforming immigration.
And consider what Kleinman is implicitly indicting. The U.S. has no national long-term care insurance. Medicaid covers nursing homes only after you've impoverished yourself, what economists call spending down. China, despite its authoritarianism, is building a public insurance pool because it has no choice. The one-child policy created an inverted population pyramid that no market solution can absorb. Both nations are failing their elders, but in opposite ways.
And who benefits from U.S.-China hostility on this front? The defense contractors. The tech firms selling vaporware robotic solutions. The private equity giants, Carlyle, KKR, Blackstone, that have bought up American nursing homes and gutted staffing to extract dividends. A 2021 NBR study found private equity-owned nursing homes have 10% higher mortality rates. That's not care. That's harvest.
And the geopolitical framing prevents any honest conversation. We can't borrow Chinese policy ideas because that's communism. China can't borrow American ideas because that's Western interference. Meanwhile, 8,000 baby boomers turn 65 every single day in the United States, and there is no plan. None. The press treats aging as a soft feature story when it is the defining economic crisis of the next 30 years.
Which brings us to story 4, and a very different kind of crisis. Middle East Eye reports that the UK Maritime Trade Operations, UKMTO, received a report of a suspicious approach off the coast of Yemen, urging caution to vessels in the region. The language is deliberately vague. Suspicious approach. That's intelligence speak for, something happened, and someone wants plausible deniability.
The Red Sea and Gulf of Aden corridor handles roughly 12% of global trade. Since the Houthi campaign began in late 2023 in response to the Gaza war, insurance premiums for vessels in this corridor have increased over 900%. Traffic through Suez has collapsed by more than half. And yet you rarely see this on American evening news, because acknowledging the cause for Gaza would require acknowledging U.S. complicity.
UKMTO is a Royal Navy-administered body. It's also the primary public-facing source for Western governments to warn shipping. But the framing matters. Suspicious approach lets observers wonder, was it Houthi forces? Iranian proxies? A state actor doing a false flag? Pirates? The ambiguity is itself a weapon, because it lets every party project blame onto their preferred enemy.
And who benefits from prolonged Red Sea instability? The shipping lines that have rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope and now charge exporters premium rates. The oil markets, which price in geopolitical risk. The defense contractors selling missile defense systems to Gulf states. And the political class in Washington that uses Houthi attacks to justify expanded central command budgets while never addressing the war driving the response.
There's a pattern here, Maya. Every story tonight involves a ruling class profiting from chaos it refuses to resolve. Hong Kong's gambling state. Suppressed labor. Privatized eldercare. A bombing campaign in Yemen with no exit strategy. The system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed for the people who own it.
Which brings us to our final story, and a more human one. Al Jazeera reports that Alex Zanardi, the former Formula One driver who became a Paralympic champion after losing his legs in a horrific 2001 racing crash at the Lausitzring, has died at age 59. Zanardi was credited with transforming Italian and global perceptions of disability.
Zanardi's story matters because it exposes how rare his treatment was. He survived because Formula One had elite trauma response. He thrived because Italy's national health system covered years of rehabilitation that would bankrupt an American family. He won Paralympic gold because state-funded sport infrastructure existed. Take any one of those supports away and Zanardi becomes a statistic, not a hero.
And that's the unspoken indictment. Every disabled person deserves Zanardi's chances. In the United States, 27% of adults have a disability, and Medicaid waiting lists for home-based care stretch into the hundreds of thousands. The mainstream coverage will eulogize Zanardi as exceptional. The harder truth is that he was lucky to be Italian, lucky to be famous, lucky to be insured by a sport that valued him.
Connect the threads, viewers. A lottery jackpot in a city with no path to homeownership. A global labor uprising the U.S. press won't cover. A demographic crisis the political class can't speak honestly about. A naval shadow war driven by a genocide we fund. And a champion whose triumph depended on a public health system Americans aren't allowed to have.
These aren't 5 separate stories. They're 5 symptoms of one disease, a global ruling class that has decoupled its prosperity from the well-being of the people it governs. They want you watching the lottery numbers, not the picket lines. They want you fearing China, not learning from it. They want you mourning Zanardi, not demanding his healthcare for everyone.
So here's your call to action. First, go find the May Day coverage your local network ignored. Al Jazeera, France 24, tell us you are, democracy now. Diversify your news diet or stay propagandized. Second, call your representatives about long-term care insurance. The Washington PAC class won't raise it, you have to.
Third, interrogate every suspicious approach headline. Ask who benefits from vagueness. Ask whose war is being laundered through whose press release. And fourth, when you see a lottery story trending, ask what desperation is being monetized and what crisis is being hidden behind the numbers. Awareness is the prerequisite to resistance.
We're Truth Report. We don't soften it. We don't sponsor it. And we don't apologize for naming names. The system is not failing, it is functioning. Your job, and ours, is to stop pretending otherwise.
Stay sharp. Stay organized. Stay loud. We'll see you next time.